Welcome back. This is Business Today. And let's now take a look at other stories making headlines in business. The World Bank has raised the red flag, saying they forecast a potential slowdown of funding infrastructure projects in Africa. The bank's president, Dr. Jim Yong Kim, says African governments need to scale up tax collection to meet the ever-rising infrastructure demands. KTN's Abby Agina, who is in Peru's capital, Lima, covering the ongoing IMF World Bank annual meeting, sought answers from Dr. Kim on the implications of this for Kenya.
Go right here in front.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. My name is Agina from Kenya. Two questions. In light of the strengthening of the U.S. economy, we've seen a number of African countries sort of being uncertain when it comes to access to capital from the World Bank. Should the African countries be worried out of this trend? And secondly, the other biggest beneficiary of course, World Bank projects is Africa. Speaking specifically for Kenya, we've had a problem when it comes to adoption and absorption of public-private partnerships. Perhaps where are we getting it wrong, and should we look forward to seeing more policy reviews regarding this? Thank you.
Thanks very much. You know, I am very worried about access to capital in Africa, and you know, we've seen now that borrowing costs are already going up. It's getting more and more difficult. We're trying to be as innovative as possible by guaranteeing parts of the bond issuances that are going out. But there's no question that interest rates will go up, and with the overall flight of capital out of emerging markets, I think it's going to get tougher and tougher. I think there are still innovative ways for us to provide more financing for Africa. For example, we have quite a bit of IDA equity that we could begin leveraging on global capital markets. And although it wouldn't be the 0% interest that IDA is, we would still take advantage of our very strong track record, get a very good rating, and then perhaps be able to offer loans with longer maturities at much lower rates. Now, the African leaders have told us this is very much what we want, but in terms of going forward, again, the board has taken the lead. All of these different possibilities, leveraging IDA equity, whether we need a capital increase, all of the things are on the table, and we're going to discuss it in a very methodical way over time. And also, of course, if things get really bad, then we're going to have to accelerate. But this is what we always do. Yes, we're worried, but I think also we have some innovations, I think, that could help us. In terms of the PPPs are difficult everywhere in the world, and we know that many have failed in many different countries in the world, and this is why we put a specific focus on trying to improve our effectiveness in helping countries with public-private partnerships. So it's not an African phenomenon, it's not a Kenyan phenomenon, it's everywhere, and you know, stalled PPPs are everywhere in the world, and although they're a great idea, it turns out they're really quite complicated to actually make work. So we're trying to increase our capacity to support countries all over the world in building successful PPPs.
On the sidelines of the IMF meeting in Peru, however, U.S. actor Sean Penn was rallying young entrepreneurs, saying they hold the key to their success.
Hollywood actor and activist Sean Penn spoke to young entrepreneurs as part of the World Bank IMF Summit in Lima yesterday, where he encouraged them to go out and strive for success in an increasingly connected world. Speaking before flagship Young Entrepreneurs as Drivers of Sustainable Growth seminar, Penn said young entrepreneurs in developing countries can now use greater connectivity across the world to achieve their dreams. But the acclaimed actor cautioned against spending too much time online and called for youth to connect to nature. The aim of the seminar is to discuss the role played by young entrepreneurs to help boost development. Adelaide Changole, KTN Business.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel is also one who is causing a lot of change in Germany as well, and has promised that the government will stand by the auto industry following the scandal brought about by Volkswagen admission to cheating in U.S. emissions tests. Speaking in the western city of Wuppertal, the Chancellor said anyone who tries to pillory the entire automobile industry because of misconduct in one area will have to deal with the German government since many jobs are connected to that sector. However, she urged Volkswagen to give details on its misconduct quickly and openly. Public prosecutors said they had searched the VW headquarters in Wolfsburg and other places for documents and data storage with regard to VW's manipulation of diesel emissions. Germany is Europe's biggest car manufacturer and home to BMW and Mercedes-Benz maker Daimler, as well as VW or Volkswagen. Now, today is the first anniversary of local airline Jambojet, and to further tell us more about what's happening and whether or not there are any new milestones we are looking at, we're now going to be connecting to KTN's Zinzi Kibiku. Zinzi, what is happening at the first anniversary for Jambojet?
Well, thank you, Joy. Right now we're at their offices right here next to Kenya Airways, and we are going to talk to none other than Willem Hondio, CEO of Jambojet, who will help us not only understand how far it has been for them in the past 18 months, but help us understand low-cost carriers in Kenya, in Africa. And right now, Willem, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to KTN News. Low-cost carriers are becoming very popular in Africa, even amongst Kenyans. What is the future of the low-cost carrier, Just?
I think there's a lot of potential in Africa. The only question always is, when should you start operating in a certain country? Because not all countries are alike. You see a lot of low-cost carriers in Europe and Asia, USA, but here there are only a few countries where you see low-cost. South Africa is a good example. Tanzania, now in Kenya, Morocco, and it will also start up now in Zimbabwe.
Does Jambojet plan to fly across Kenya's borders?
At a certain moment we will start doing so. We want to build up first in domestic Kenya, so we want to grow here first. So we will open up another number of routes domestic, and then we will move onward to international.
Help me understand this. In 2013, the global network aviation recorded 3.1 billion passengers and it was credited to low-cost carriers. Did Africa, or how can Africa rather, tap into those same numbers and our presence be felt on a global platform?
Yeah, if you look to passenger numbers, the African numbers are very small. You have a lot of people living in Africa, but the people who can afford to travel by air is limited. You see a growing middle class, and that's what the low-cost carriers are aiming at. They see that more and more people can afford to fly, and the first ones will most probably first buy low-cost carriers before they can afford carriers like Kenya Airways and others. So we hope that we can tap into that market.
Back in 1990, Europe signed what they call an open sky agreement. In Africa, we did the same thing in 1988. Yes. However, it hasn't been enforced properly. How can low-cost carriers in Africa tap into each other to make sure our own open agreement is effectively enforced?
Yeah, it starts all here with the government themselves. You see now that the Northern Corridor, that is the four countries, South Sudan, Rwanda, Uganda and Kenya, they now really try to introduce open skies. That means that these four countries consider the four countries as domestic. That would help tremendously in moving forward, because that would simply mean that as Jambojet we could also operate from Entebbe without starting a new airline. And that is the way to go, but for the rest of Africa that will take some time still.
I'm glad you brought up the issue of the government, because most African governments are scared that low-cost carriers will overtake the national carriers such as Kenya Airways, Ethiopian Airlines, and South African Airlines. Is there a way that national carriers and low-cost carriers can complement each other while still offering healthy competition?
No, what you see is that the bigger carriers like Ethiopian and Kenya Airways and so forth, they are the so-called network carriers. So they bring passengers from via their home base, in this case Nairobi, to another place next to the local passengers, and they fly much longer distances. Local carriers fly only point to point and short distances. We will never fly flights longer than 2.5 to 3 hours most probably. So there is a good way of living next to each other.
Right. We all know the El Nino weather is coming up. How is Jambojet preparing to tackle that? And are we going to see passenger numbers reduce?
I don't think the passenger numbers will really reduce. The thing where we have to be aware of is that people need to go to the airport much earlier, because you will see that when the rains are there, roads are not as accessible as they should be. There will be more cars on the road, so people should be very well aware that it will simply take longer to get to the airport. We will still keep on flying, and yeah, let's hope that we...
Awesome. Talk to me about the current numbers that you have and how you plan to boost that.
Last year we carried around 500,000 passengers, and we have now a market share of around 30% domestic. This year we expect to go in the direction of 600,000, 650,000, and then we will grow slowly in the years thereafter.
Fantastic. Last question. According to the Kenya annual report, Jambojet made a loss of about 287 million. What was the cost behind that, and how do you plan to move forward after your current performance?
Yeah, when you start up a company, in this case an airline, you mostly have starting up costs and starting up losses. Same counts for us. So we had a 290 million or 280 million loss, but that was mainly in the first half year of last year. So the second half year we did much better, and I can tell you that this year we will do even better than that. I cannot disclose the figures yet, but the half year figures will be published in a couple of months, and then you will see that we're doing quite well.
Before I let you go, paint for us a picture of the LCC industry, not only in Kenya but for our East African audience. Where is this industry heading to?
No, what you will see is that more and more carriers will try to start up in this part of the world, because there are a lot of chances in this part of the world. So I think that segment will grow really fast in the next 5 to 10 years. So I expect that the passenger numbers will grow tremendously in all those countries where those low-cost carriers will operate.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Joy, that was none other than the CEO of Jambojet, Vilas Hundes, talking to us, showing his confidence on the LCC industry, not only in Kenya, but for Africa. And regarding the El Nino seasons, if you're traveling during that time, the best way to conquer and arrange for your flights is preparing yourself earlier. Joy?
Well, thanks a lot, Zinzi Kibiku. Zinzi, coming to us live from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, where Jambojet is marking its first anniversary since it launched officially here in Kenya. And low-cost flights have been quite the big question, especially knowing that a lot of airlines are not really making that affordable for a number of airline users, or do we say passengers, locally. And that is something that I think needs, going forward, needs to be looked into as well, to enable more Kenyans fly using air transport. Thanks a lot, Cindy, for that. Now, of course, we've come to the end of business today for this hour, but we'll be having more business updates at about 3:30 p.m. Kenya time, so do stay tuned for that. My name is Joy Durin Bira. I'll be back shortly with News Hour. Don't go too far.